Hey everybody, what is going on? Hexlex here. Got another Master Duel video for you. So, we're talking about the latest Forbidden and Limited List update to Master Duel yet again. Yesterday, I did already post a video about it, but that was my quite literal first reaction to it. As in, I literally woke up in the morning, checked my phone, saw a notification on Discord that said a new ban list had dropped, and then minutes later was pressing the record button and making that video. So now that I've had a little bit more time to think about the list, about the changes, about the implications, about what each deck that may or may not play these cards, how that's affecting them and the meta as a whole. The meta as a whole, actually, we will talk about that a little bit more in what should be tomorrow's video. I've got our post ban list, tier list planned out. So we're going to be doing that as well. We'll rank each deck, but I wanted to talk about the cards themselves, the ban list changes, before we went into the meta as a whole, because I just want to, have a little bit more of a constructive conversation about it, and really talk about the implications of what these changes mean. Again, not just for each individual card or deck, but also kind of Konami's, I guess, sort of design philosophy behind the ban list changes here. So yeah, I'm not going to waste any more time. Let's just go ahead and start getting right into it. We're going to start with cards that are going to be unlimited, so the cards that are going to 3, and then we'll go 2, 1, 0, and just do it in that order. So first off, I'm going to talk about Redox, Dragon Ruler of Boulders, Tidal, Dragon Ruler of Waterfalls, and Tempest, Dragon Ruler of Storms, kind of all at the same time, because each of these 3 cards, they are very different in what they do, but in the same ways they are very similar. So the thing about Dragon Rulers, right, is that right now in the current state of Yu-Gi-Oh, I kind of think that these cards are just a little bit too resource intensive to be as good as they were a decade ago. They are strong effects, don't get me wrong, but to play them all in the same deck, again, not only do they each require a lot of resources to really get going, be it using their hand effects or graveyard effects to summon themselves, or the discard effects to, activate their individualized effects. Also, you got to think about what kind of an end board this type of deck is trying to go for. They're all level 7, so the first thing that comes to mind is like a Tomahawk style deck, but I think there are more consistent and less resource intensive ways to make Tomahawk. That said, I do think that the Dragon Ruler going to 3 does still have some interesting implications, but I think more so for individual decks that would want to use them, as opposed to a deck that's using all of the Dragon Rulers. I, for example, am looking at Redox, Dragon Ruler of Boulders, right? And I think about Punk Tuners. The Punk Tuners are all Earth, and they're all level 3, tuners. We know that level 3 tuners compare very well with level 7 non-tuners, as there is a good amount of level 10 synchro monsters to make, not the least of which is, of course, everyone's favorite Omni-Negate, Baron de Fleur. But also, again, the Redox is Earth, which all the Punk Tuners are as well. The Monster Reborn effect actually might have some good application. Deer Note is a similar type of effect that's already kind of worth using. I don't even talk about the Deer Note effect to bring a monster back, but even the in-hand effect, right? We don't mind using Deer Note in that regard, so maybe there is a Punk build that utilizes 3 Redox to good effect, along with maybe some other, because, I mean, to be fair, the Punk Tuners and Deer Note being Earth is already probably enough, but you probably would need at least some amount of other Earth monsters. I guess Maxi is also an Earth monster. I don't know if that's actually good or not, but it is an idea that I have when I see Redox go to 3, so Tidal offers more Foolish Burial type of options for water decks in particular, although do note that while you have to discard a water monster with Tidal in order to use the effect, you can send any monster from your deck to the graveyard. So it's a very niche situation, but if you are a deck that has water monsters in hand and wants to send monsters from your deck to the graveyard, then yeah, Tidal to 3 is a pretty huge boost, honestly. I also think it's interesting that Tidal and Redox, actually Redox is at 1 in both TCG and OCG, but Tidal is still banned in both. The Dragon Rulers as a whole are pretty much all, at least the ones that are going to 3 here, are all still at 1 or banned in both TCG or OCG. This is definitely showing us that Konami is willing to use Master Duel as a sort of testing grounds for unlimits like this. which I honestly think is cool. I think that's totally fine, right? Because I do think that Master Duel should be treated as its own format. So I think making the format more unique and kind of even using that as a way to see how similar changes might apply to TCG and OCG is a cool way to do things. Plus, I'm not really concerned about the Dragon Rulers coming back to 3. I think this is completely fine. Tempest definitely has some good applications in Dragoonity in particular. Dragoonity might also be a lot more relevant with some of the hits that we've seen to Dragon Link. So, yeah, I mean, overall, I think the Dragon Wars coming to 3 is a cool change. I don't think this replaces Dragon Link, by the way. I've not seen people say this really, but I can see somebody thinking that, oh, if the Dragon Rulers are all coming to 3 while Dragon Link is getting hit, maybe Dragon Rulers can kind of replace them. No, I think they're two very different decks, again, not only in how they play, but also the kind of end boards they make. But at the same time, I do think that their individual applications in other decks, aside from a Dragon Pile, is a bit more interesting to think about than a Dragon Pile. I'm not saying that can't work, but I have a more difficult time seeing that working. So, alright, after the Dragon Rulers, let's now talk about Speedroid Terratop. This card is at 2 in the TCG, 1 in OCG, and is going from 1 to 3, making the leap up to 3. This seems like another sort of testing the waters kind of unlimit. And I think also comes as part of a bit of a test that Konami seems to be doing overall, with not only Terratop here, but also MX Saber Invoker and the Zodiacs. These cards were all part of the Tier 0 Zodiac deck. I think Terratop was too, from what I understand. I didn't actually play during that time, but the idea of using MX Saber Invoker to get out your Zodiacs and then utilize that engine, it seems like Konami is kind of seeing how much of that style of deck they can unlimit and it be fine. I have seen people say that Terratop to 3 with Barrage also at 3 is too good and insane because it allows any deck to have an engine that goes into a 4 material Zeus. And to be fair, that is a pretty powerful result for a fairly non-committal as far as like restrictions or summoning requirements or anything. Sort of engine. But I think the commitment from that style of engine comes from your main and extra deck space. I mean, it's easy to say, oh, any deck can make a 4 material Zeus with Terratop at 3, but you have to be playing Terratops and MX Saber Invoker and Zodiac monsters in your main deck and Zodiac monsters in your extra deck on top of the Zeus already. That's a lot of stuff, and a lot of modern Yu-Gi-Oh decks can't very easily accommodate that. I do think that this does add an interesting option for the Zodiac deck, but much like the Zodiac deck, it ended up being completely fine when Barrage came back to 3 and Rapier came off and Dryden went to 3. I think Terratop to 3 is also completely fine. Also, Speedroid players eating so well. That deck is actually already, like, competitively viable in terms of, like, making it to Master or possibly seeking a tournament top here or there. And this is a huge power buff for them. Good for them. Speedroids is a very cool deck. Predaplant Orphis Scorpio. Yeah, this card, I have no idea why this card was at 2 for as long as it was. It's never seen play in Master Duel. I'm assuming this had to do with, like, an older pre-Master Duel sort of hit. The card is actually still at 1 in the OCG, which I think is weird. Yeah, I've never seen this card do anything. Again, it probably did things from the formats when I wasn't playing, but as far as its time in Master Duel and my experience with it in Master Duel, well, my experience with it is non-existent. I don't think I've literally ever seen somebody play this card. This is completely fine. Yep. Predaplants, you get another copy of a good card. Good. Sword Soul Strategist Longyan, going from 2 to 3. Finally. Wow. This is one of those semis that felt a little unnecessary, but I will say, at the time this card went to 2, I actually don't think this was a terrible hit at all. I do think it ended up staying on the list for a lot longer than it needed to. In fact, I think it really only needed to be at 2 for probably a couple of months, I think, at best. But I think even then, there's a world where Longyan never went to 2 at all, and, like, the meta didn't really majorly change as a result. But Sword Soul has definitely started to fall off, just in terms of its overall power level. And in that regard, it needs all the help it can get, especially because unlike a lot of other Albaz lore archetypes, like Branded, like Despia, like Dogmatica, Sword Soul does not really get more support. It gets a card here or there that is very mid and doesn't even really help its deck. So yeah, Sword Soul needs all the help it can get. And this card going to 3 is... Mwah, I love it. It's good. Good change. Good change. Overall, I am satisfied with all of the unlimits. I think these are all good changes. Okay, let's talk about the one semi-limit. The one semi-limit, which is Pretty Memory. Yeah, this card going to 2 is... I think it's interesting that it's going to 2, because you would think it would be Sleepy Memory going to 2. That's the card that's been hit, I think, in both TCG and OCG at this point. But the reason we haven't seen Sleepy Memory hit is because we actually don't have all of the Pearly cards yet, including the Epperly Noir, which is kind of like the second stage evolution, if you want to call it that, below X-Pearly Noir. That card gains its extra effect of, I believe, searching Pearly Trap cards off of having the Pearly Sleepy Memory attached. But again, we don't actually have that card. Believe it or not, Pearly is still not at full power in Master Duel. So, as a result, Pearly in its current Master Duel iteration tends to rely a bit more on Beauty and Pretty Memory as a result, in order to make sure that it can have some other kinds of plays besides just summoning Noir or going for the OTK, having some additional disruption in that regard. Again, TCG and OCG builds got that additional disruption from using the Epperly Noir to search the trap. I'm assuming they would just grab Perleap and go into the X-Pearly Noir as a quick effect off of, more things than just getting a big Delicious. But I think this change is fine. Pretty Memory to 2. I do think that there will be a point down the road where, I don't know, actually, with this change and the other one we're going to see, because I was going to say there's probably a point down the road where Sleepy Memory ends up going to 2 after Epperly Noir comes out, and then this change feels kind of bad. It might be a bit unnecessary, but with this change, and another one we're going to see here shortly, it might not be necessary to put Sleepy Memory to 2 or 1, even after Epperly Noir comes out. We're just going to have to see how things play out with that. I think for the time being, with Pearly's current spot in the meta, this is a fine hit. Yeah, I think it's a fine hit overall. And that was our one semi-limit. So now we're going to talk about cards that are going to be limited. And we're starting off with a big one, Kashtira Fenrir. That was weird, scroll by itself. Kashtira Fenrir. So, I have said in the past that I think this card should actually go to 0. In fact, lately when people ask me, like on streams, what card do I think should get banned, this tends to be the first card I think of. As you can see, it's also banned in the OCG, and I really like that they did that there. I do think, I will say this, I think if Fenrir did go to 0, I think no other hits to Kashtira would have been necessary, and as I've said before, I think if Fenrir had gone to 0, they could have even got back 1 or 2 field spells, and that would have been totally fair and fine. Some people have, even though I've made this clarification every time I talk about this, I still get comments that are like, what the heck, you think Kashtira needs to get hit? No, I think Fenrir needs to go to 0 because it's too good of a card by itself. Not just because like Kashtira is too good. I think Kashtira is fine. I don't have any ill will or strong feelings at all about Kashtira, to be honest, but Fenrir is independently too good of a card. That said, it going to 1 will also definitely hurt it being used as a staple by a lot. Because even with the card at 2, you could just jam 2 copies, and then Fenrir can search Fenrir, and you still have a good, strong piece of your end board. Now, you kind of have to have a reason to play at least one other Kashtira card, be it the Tier Limits Kashtira if you're a deck that wants to mill a lot, be it the Scareclaw Kashtira if you're a deck that wants to body and can consistently, summon the Scareclaw Cash. It could be Scareclaw itself, that could be Monadium, that could be a deck with a more expanded Kashtira engine, that might be using Unicorn as well. So, you do have to have a bit more of a reason to want Fenrir in your deck now. That said, I don't know. We'll see how 1 plays out. It'll probably be fine. Yeah, yeah, I don't know. I think the card could still probably go to 0, but it's fine. I think it's probably going to be fine at 1 too. Yeah, that's pretty much it for Fenrir there. Again, I also don't think this was a Kashtira hit, although this does incidentally also end up being a Kashtira hit, which we have been seeing that deck see a bit more play. Because after the deck first came out, and a lot of people realized Kashtira was not as consistent at all in Master Duel as it was in TCG or OCG, because the Field Spell and Prosperity were both at 1, then the deck fell off super hard, and people were even calling Kashtira bad. You can go back and watch videos from about that point in time. I said back then, Kashtira isn't bad, it just got overhyped, and now people are dropping it off en masse. But I said at that time as well that I think Kashtira will see an increase in play and start to take more tournament tops, and that's kind of exactly what ended up happening. So, yeah, I think Fenrir to 1, again, just need to happen in general because of Fenrir, but as a hit to Kashtira, I think it's also fine. Did Kashtira need to get hit? No. But I think it's fine that it got a minor hit as well. That's okay. It actually did get another hit we'll talk about later. Okay, Inspector Border to 1. There can be only 1, also going to 1. I'll lump Kaiser Coliseum to 1, as well as Synchro Zone to 1 into this kind of section we're going to talk about here. Those other cards I had to scroll down for, I'll touch on later as we go back over them. But mainly, again, Border to 1, there can be only 1 to 1. Synchro Zone to 1, and Kaiser Coliseum to 1. These are all hits to stun decks, as a lot of us are familiar with. But for those of you who are not familiar with the term, stun refers to the style of strategy that would play a lot of these cards that say players can't special summon or, activate effects, or in the case of Synchro Zone, can't attack with a lot of different kinds of monsters. Indeed, these are a lot of different cards that would go into the same style of deck, which is stun, which is kind of about playing the minimum amount of cards needed to make sure that your opponent cannot play any cards at all. So, as far as this kind of strategy goes, a lot of players are not fans of it. It creates what a lot of players refer to as quote-unquote non-games. A non-game is where the amount of cards being played between both players is very minimal. Again, this style of deck can normal summon Border, set there can be only 1. Oftentimes, your opponent will not be able to really play any cards at all after that, and then they can just kind of ride the win on these 2 cards over a course of time. So, as far as how I personally feel about this style of deck, I'm not a fan of playing against it, and I do think that it probably needed to be curbed at least a little bit more. We definitely saw this when Master Duel first started, right? And Skill Drain was at 3, Rivalry of the Warlords was at 3, Gozen Match was at 3, Imperial Order was still legal at 1, Vandy's Emptiness was still legal at 1. There were a lot of stun decks in the meta. Stun was considered a tier 1 deck, whereas for a long time now, it's been about a rogue level deck, I would say. Some might argue it's tier 3, but it really hasn't. I think it's rogue, honestly. But yeah, no, when those cards were all legal at that number of copies in a best of 1 format, it was a huge problem. And as they started to get hit, then we saw less and less of stun. I do think that the amount of cards and tools that stun had was still a bit too high. I didn't think that this number of changes were ever going to happen, especially all at once. But I'm not inherently opposed to them. I thought there can be only 1 would go to 1, and that would be like the only change. This card is definitely on par with Rivalry and Gozen, which went to 1 quite a while ago, and I think definitely also needed to go to 1 along with them. Inspector Border, I am definitely not sad to see go to 1 either. A lot of people have said, or I've seen at least a couple of people say, why this card did not Fossil Dyna Pachycephalo. I think the idea is that Fossil Dyna is a lot easier to out, it has much lower attack and defense, and as a result, it's very easy to normal summon a monster and just battle over it. It's not always if they have the Moon Mirror Shield, but at that point, that's a 2-card combo that they need to specifically draw into. So, Border, on the other hand, with 2,000 attack and defense, and the ability to pretty much stop your opponent from activating monster effects at all, is a lot more difficult to out with just like one normal summoned monster, right? So, yeah, I think that this was a fine hit as well. The Kaiser Coliseum to 1, I was a little bit surprised by, but I'm not opposed to it. The TCG has it banned. Wow, I didn't even realize that, but yeah, I think this is definitely one of the weaker floodgates, and Synchro Zone to 1, I'm not going to lie, I was floored when I saw this. I did not think at all this card needed to get hit. This is a very, very weak kind of floodgate effect. It only stops attacks, and even then, there's a good amount of decks that are even being played in the meta right now, like Monadium, that can just attack through this anyway because they play Synchro monsters. But I think this was a popular tool, particularly in the Duelist Cup. I mean, Stun as a whole was very popular in the Duelist Cup, so that's why you're seeing a lot of these hits here. And I will say there's a certain design philosophy that Konami seems to apply to ban lists, where they will more heavily hit decks that play older cards, and in particular are not often boosted by newer cards coming out. There's a lot of instances where it's pretty clear that Konami is saying, hey y'all, can you please play a different deck, preferably one that requires you to spend gems, i.e. money, to get? And Stun was one of those decks that's been around and has been fairly unchanged since the beginning of Master Duel. So there are a lot of players who just bought, used their URs for borders, and there can be only ones, and have just been sitting on them since, right? So I think Konami wants people like that to play new decks. I think there's some other changes on this list that are kind of indicative of that as well, that we'll talk about when we get to them. But yeah, I think that these 4 cards going to 1 are fine. I don't think Kaiser Coliseum or Synchro Zone needed to go to 1, but I don't think many people are sad that they did. But particularly Border, and there can be only 1, especially this card going to 1, good hits. I think these are good hits. Runic Destruction going from 2 to 1. Why? Why? I legitimately have no idea why this hit is being... Yeah, I don't get it. This is probably the most baffling hit on the list for me. I've already talked at length in multiple videos now about Runic Fountain going to 1 and how I think that was a mistake, so I won't get too much into it here. But one other thing that we can definitely see from Border, and there can be only 1 going to 1, is that Fountain to 1 was not enough for Stun decks to stop seeing play. I don't know why people thought that would be the case, especially because Stun exists outside of Runic. Like, this style of deck does not even need Runic to be good. So, yeah, of course Runic Fountain to 1 didn't matter. Of course these hits needed to happen anyway. Fountain to 1, I think, was another one of those Konami telling people, hey everybody, can you please play different decks, particularly ones that need new cards. And I think Destruction to 2, from 2 to 1 rather, is a further kind of cementing of that. I think this is probably the worst change on the ban list. It doesn't even hurt Runic Stun at all. Like, of all the Runic cards to hit to 1 too, why Destruction? Why the one that destroys spell and trap cards? It's genuinely baffling to me. I don't get it. Terrible hit. Terrible hit. Pot of Desires going from 2 to 1. I think this was a fine hit. I think the Pot of cards getting limited is totally fine. Prosperity was the biggest one. I'm very, very glad that card went to 1. Extrav was another big booster to like stun style decks. Desires was also used in a lot of stun style decks, but was also just used in a good variety of decks, being one of the more... Being the pot of card that draws you 2 and does not require you to eat any of your extra deck, it was a little bit easier for combo decks to play this card too. The pot of cards should probably all be at 1. Again, I think that they, generally speaking, are a little bit too generic. They do each have their own individual restrictions and are unique in that regard. But yeah, I think as a whole, they're just a little bit too generic of draw / filtering power. Desires to 1 is completely fine. I'm not sad to see this card go to 1. Kaiser Coliseum, we already covered. This is an interesting incidental hit to Sky Striker as well, but Sky Striker did not live or die by Kaiser Coliseum at all. It just sometimes played 3 of this card. Now I think you pretty much never see Sky Striker play this card. Yeah, I think it's a completely fine hit. Kashira Birth, going from 3 to 1. There's actually something kind of interesting about this hit that I want to point out here. Notably that not a lot of decks played 3 Kashira Birth. If we look at the breakdown for Kashira Birth here on Master Duel meta, you'll see that Kashira played 3 a lot of the time, 94%. But then you start getting to the other decks that would even splash this card, and it's like, mostly at 1, mostly at 1 copy. You know, if they play it, 1 copy, 1 copy, 1 copy, 1 copy. Gate Guardian, I guess, sometimes played 2, but Armed Dragon, these level 7 base decks sometimes played extra copies because they like normal summoning level 7 monsters. But yeah, I mean, you look at all these decks, and Dragon Ruler played 3. That's the one other deck, which again is all about normal summoning level 7 monsters. Basically, you look at all these other decks, and it's pretty clear that this was a hit to Kashira specifically. The most popular and most powerful deck that always played 3. Again, the only other deck that always played 3 was just Dragon Ruler, which did not see much play at all. So this is pretty clearly a Kashira hit. It's a bit of an odd one to me, but it also kind of makes sense at the same time. Like, if I was thinking of hitting a card to hit pure Kashira, my first thought would be Kashira Theosis. But the Birth to 1 hit, I think, is a little bit more elegant because, again, a lot of decks that were using Birth as part of a Kashira engine were only playing 1 anyway. Pure Cash was the only build that was actually on 3. I saw someone in our Discord server say, I think it was Kenny actually. Somebody was saying that the limit was because it played well into Maxi. And I honestly do think that Konami wants Maxi to be a part of Yu-Gi-Oh! And that's why they, for example, hit Flaunderies so hard. That deck also does not require a lot of URs or URs from new decks to be good. So those Flaunderies hits, I think, are definitely in line with like Konami's overall philosophy of what they want to be good and what they don't want to be good. Which a lot of the time what they want to be good and what they don't want to be good is in line of what makes for a healthy meta. And in some cases, it's pretty clearly to push a certain card or deck. So I don't know. Birth to 1 was an interesting hit overall. It is, again, definitely a blow to like a more pure Kashira deck, which I don't think, especially with Fenrir going to 1, this hit needed to happen at all. But I don't know. I'm not particularly sad about it, but I don't think it's the best hit either. Again, especially when you think about the fact that Fenrir also went to 1, and they still only have 1 field spell. Yeah, I think this card going to 1 was a bit odd. It is elegant in its intention of only hitting pure Kashira. I just don't think that intention was needed or good. Duality to 1, I pretty much already talked about this. Desires going to 1. Duality to 1, though, Pot of Duality was specifically played more in stun decks and also Flaunderies. Poor Flu actually taking another hit on this ban list with Duality going to 1. Because this card says you can't special summon during the same turn. So, but again, I do think the Pot of cards all generally needed to probably go to 1. So, yeah, I think this is a fine hit. Pearly Delicious Memory from 2 to 1. Why did this card have a pit stop at 2? I even said in the last ban list video, why did this card not just go to 1? This card just needed to go to 1. I guess, if nothing else, they did at least, you know, put it to 1 like they should have. But, yeah, it's kind of like I said in the last ban list video, we talked about Delicious Memory getting hit. This card is definitely one of the most important ones to Pearly, and being able to consistently hit it is what makes that deck so scary. Excuse me, sorry about that. So, with this card going to 1, they are now much less likely to hit it off of the My Friend Pearly. it's a 33% chance now instead of a 66% chance before. So, yeah, I definitely think that Pearly, and again, especially remember the fact that Pearly is still not at full power in Master Duel. Pearly Noir, as well as I think at least one other card, hasn't been released yet. So, yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what becomes of Pearly after this ban list. It's funny because, I don't know, this could just very easily be a me thing. I never saw Pearly on ladder after Delicious Memory went to 2. You would still see it in tournaments and in Duelist Cup and in, you know, more generally competitive environments because it was, of course, still a very good deck. But I never saw it on ladder, and I would be very surprised if I saw Pearly any more after this ban list than I did before. And I think in tournaments you will see people bringing it less and less. I don't think the deck is bad, but I would want to see how this particular upcoming season plays out before I'm super comfortable saying that Pearly is like no longer a tiered deck or something like that. Again, we'll talk more about where I think Pearly is at on the tier list video, but Synchro Zone to 1, we already talked about this. I think this is a joke of a hit, though. I really do. I don't even think that Synchro Zone was necessarily like optimal to play in stun decks. I only have run into this card exactly one time myself on ladder, which again, that's only my own personal experience. That's not solely indicative of what should be hit on the ban list. But it's also like, yeah, it only stops attacks, which is the weakest thing for a Floodgate to stop. And even then, it's only attacks except for Synchro monsters. So even if you're playing this trying to use it as a Floodgate, you could still roll into a Synchro deck very easily and have this not do anything at all. To be fair, it's not like Synchro decks were using it, so this card getting hit, like, nothing's really losing out as a result, but I still think it's a terrible hit. Like, this is a joke of a hit. I don't think anybody's sad about it, but it still did not need to happen at all. Okay, now we're going to talk about the bans. Super Heavy Samurai Soul Breaker Armor. I don't know a whole lot about how Super Heavy Samurai played with this card. I don't have an experience playing with or against it, so because I don't play TCG or OCG. So, you know, from what I understand, this was used in more of an OTK or sometimes maybe even FTK, I don't know, style strategy by just burning the opponent with multiple copies of this card. This does banish all copies of the card when you activate the effect, but it's not a once per turn. So from what I understand, you could just get one in the graveyard, burn, later in the combo put another one in the graveyard, burn, and then do it a third time, right? You just do it one at a time. So the not having a once per turn but having to banish all copies of it from the graveyard is a very laughable restriction. But yeah, I mean, if this card was simply going to enable an OTK via burn, it's totally fine for this card to get banned. That's not the style of deck that a lot of people like to play against, myself included. So yeah, and again, when did you ever see Super Heavy Samurai, period? And when did you ever see them use this card? I think this is totally fine to go to 0. Yeah, definitely good. Good. Card of Demise, going from 2 to 0. I am totally in favor of this hit. This also gives us a glimpse as to, I think, why Fountain went to 1. I think one of the big issues that Konami had with Stun, in particular, was how easily it could recur resources, right? I think that's also why Duality and the Pot of cards started getting hit as well. But this card going to 0 just makes me more frustrated that Fountain ever went to 1 in the first place. This card, by the way, is also why Fountain getting hit was not at all a hit to stun, because even if Fountain got banned, they would have just played this anyway and had their draw 3 all the same. So, but now this card has gone to 0, and I think it's very, very good hit. It's like, yeah, I mean, this card doesn't really do anything fair. Like, that's the thing, too. Like, it doesn't even necessarily have to be fair. It doesn't do anything interesting, right? Like, nobody is using this card to extend into a cool combo. Nobody's using this card for anything that isn't just, again, stun. So, 0 might have been a little harsh. Like, I think this card could have gone to 1, but I'm also not sad to see it go to 0, personally. White Dragon Wyverburster. 3 to 0. Wow, I did not see this coming. I don't think anybody did. But this very much kills not only this card, but also Black Dragon Collapse Serpent for any deck that would run them, most notably Dragon Link. White Dragon Wyvern Burst getting banned is a... I think this is, of like all of the hits, the one that is a biggest shakeup to a particular deck, but I don't necessarily think it was a good hit to put this card to 0. I would have honestly liked to see a TCG style hit where both it and Collapse Serpent go to 1. That way, I don't know, because here's the thing, right? Like, Dragon Link is already suffering another hit here, and like, did the deck need to get hit this hard? I don't know. I don't think that it did, honestly. I really don't think that it did. This, to me, also feels like Konami saying, play something else, please. Play something else, please. Especially after, like, the fact that this came right after Dissipator came out, it feels particularly a bit scummy to me. Like, it feels to me like they have been wanting to hit Dragon Link, but they had to make sure that those of you who are playing Dragon Link still bought the pack for Dissipator. Okay, now Dissipator's been out for a little bit. Okay, now we can hit Dragon Link. It's like, again, it's very much that Konami design philosophy. Now, I will say that Dragon Link probably did need to see some kind of a hit. I'm not saying that Dragon Link did not need to get hit at all, but again, it already took a hit on the same ban list that we'll talk about in a moment. And Wyvern Burst from 3 to 0 is such like a... That is like flipping a kill switch right there. I'm not saying Dragon Link is dead. I'm not saying Dragon Link doesn't exist because of this hit, but like, this is such a clear message from Konami to me of, hey, please stop playing this deck. Again, I think this card and Collapse Serpent both going to 1, like they are in the TCG, along with this other hit we'll talk about in a moment, would have been completely fine. I think this is overkill, frankly. And I don't know, it's like, a lot of people complain about playing against Dragon Link because they take forever and they put up such a big board. And while, yes, their combo lines are longer than some of their combo decks, I don't find Dragon Link boards that much more threatening than what other decks are capable of putting out. And I also don't really think the Dragon Link combos for that much longer, to be frank. At least in Master Rank, at least from my experience playing against the deck in Master Rank, I feel like people who play Dragon Link at that level are about as quick as just about any other deck. I mean, yeah, they're a little bit longer because the line is a bit more involved, but like, I'm doing that motion. I'm doing a circle motion with my finger right now, like, ooh, like, I don't know, it's fine. Who cares? Like, I don't know, it's just such a common complaint from players of like, their combos take too long, and I don't know. Maybe that is something that happens at lower levels because people are less experienced with more long-form combo decks, but the rate at which Dragon Link and similarly long-form combo decks play out in upper ranks, I think is totally fine. I don't have an issue with it at all. Yeah, no, I don't think this was a good hit. I do think that Dragon Link needed to get hit, but I think putting this card to 0 was not the move. We'll see, moving forward, how Dragon Link ends up panning out. Black Metal Dragon is still a 1-card combo line for the deck, so even though they can't use the baby Chaos Dragons anymore, which also makes Chaos Space worse. I think I erroneously said in the other ban list video that Chaos Space can search Black Metal Dragon. It cannot. So that is also going to be a bit of a hit. This also, wait, I didn't think about this until just now, but why the fuck did Chaos Space go to 2? Like, that is actually a bit of a recurring thought I've had with this ban list of like, why did Delicious Memory go to 2 before going to 1? Why didn't it just go to 1 on the last list? Why did Wyvern Burster go to 0? Like, why did Chaos Space go to 2 if Wyvern Burster was just going to go to 0 anyway? Why did all these stun cards get hit? And why did Card of Demise go to 0? Or, like, why did Fountain get hit when that just happened anyway? When all these stun cards get hit and Card of Demise went to 0? I don't know. A lot of what I don't like about this list is that a lot of these changes feel like they invalidate previous changes that were made. It kind of feels like the last couple of ban lists were meaningless in the wake of this one, which I do not like personally. But yeah, again, I don't know why Chaos Space is at 2 if this card just went to 0. Like, Chaos Space was mostly used to search up the baby Chaos Dragons. That is like the main thing it was utilized for, so I don't know, and it's, here's the thing, right? If cards like Longyan and Fractal and Cobalt Sparrow are any indication, it'll be like a year before we finally get the third Chaos Space back. I don't like that. I don't like it. I don't like it. And finally, we have to pour one out for a real one. Oh, Chaos Ruler, we hardly knew ye. That's actually not true at all. We knew this card very well. We knew how good this card was. Okay, so I will say that while Chaos Ruler did make a bunch of cool lesser power decks viable, like Runic Fountain did, unlike Runic Fountain 1, as much as I do love this card and am very biased towards it, it probably did just need to get banned, yeah. It mostly, I think, got hit because of Dragon Link. This card is an insane extension tool for Dragon Link. Dragon Link did not always need to go into Chaos Ruler on turn 1 to make its end boards. However, it was very easy for it to go into turn 1. This provided not only extra resources in hand, but an extra body to work with, and was overall just an insane card. Not only, again, for Dragon Link, but for a lot of other decks as well. Now, if you could somehow make it so Chaos Ruler was only banned for Dragon Link and no other deck, then I think Chaos Ruler would be 100% fine. But Yu-Gi-Oh! Doesn't work that way, and with good reason. I think that's a terrible way to ban cards. So, as much as I love Sprite Synchro, my literal favorite deck I've ever played in Master Duel, I think this card had to go, unfortunately. Now, I think those Chaos-style Synchro decks can still exist in some capacity. Like, I think Sprite Synchro, for example, can still exist. It can still work, but, like Assault Synchron especially, that card is so much worse in general now that Chaos Ruler is no longer a thing. Ringo Worm, I am definitely sad that my 3 Ringo Worms will get used much less now. To be fair, though, Ringo Worm can be used very well with an Adventure Engine, which Konami... Can we please have, like, one more Water Enchantress? That card could be at 3 and it would be fine, but I just want a second copy, please? But, yeah. I'm so sad to see this card go, but it should go, frankly. Honestly, not even just for Dragon Link, but, like... in a vacuum, as an individual card, it is very, very strong. It's, like, insanely strong. And, yeah. I'm just sad. I really am. I'm genuinely sad to see this card go. But I don't let my personal feelings stand in the way of where I think a card should be on the list. I will say I'm a little shocked. when I say things like a card, you hating a card is not a good reason for it to go to 0. I am genuinely a little shocked by how many people disagree with that. I maintain that I think that is a bit of a juvenile notion that, I hate this, so nobody should be allowed to have it. Like, I that's childish. I'm just going to say it. That is childish. But at the same time, I'm not going to, like, let the opposite happen to me. Like I said, I like Chaos Ruler. I love the card. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to sit here and be like, well, it's actually fine for it to be at 1, even if Dragon Link used it. Like, I'm not going to sit here and justify it. I'll even do the same thing for a card that is not on this list right now. A card that I have played a lot, even recently, and enjoy very much. Mathmech Circular is still at 3, and I think that's really stupid. That card should be at 1. Again, I love Mathmech. It's one of my main decks. I play it all the time on the channel. I've topped tournaments with it. I love playing with it. Circular, it still needs to be at 1. That card is definitely too powerful. I think Circular and Diameter both at 1 is a little, But, if it has to be, it has to be. Mathmech is entirely too powerful in its current iteration. And I think it's really sad that we didn't see Circular go to 1. Because it's such a clear message from Konami. Because guess what card is in a current selection pack in the shop? Mathmech Circular. Wow, go figure. It's almost like they don't want to ban cards that are URs that can incentivize people to spend money. And I think that's gross. I do think that's gross. Circular should have gone to 1 on this list. Definitely, for sure. I think, I don't know, as a list overall, this was a very, I don't know. The things that were good changes were like stuff like the Dragon Rulers coming back, and there can be only one, and Inspector Border going to one, which are honestly things that just feel overdue. So even the good changes don't even feel that good. And some of the less than good changes are like, they feel extra bad. Again, why Burster going to 0? Why did Chaos Space have to get hit? Card of Demise going to 0 along with all the other stun hits. Why did Fountain have to get hit? And I don't think any other Runic variant was problematic enough for Fountain to go to 1. I don't think Fountain is a problematic enough card in a vacuum to need to go to 1. That's just my personal opinion on it. But Chaos War to 0, I think this was actually a good time for it. Like this, even though this is my favorite card and it got banned, I think this was one of the most solid changes on this list. So here you can see a full spread of all the changes, and that I think is going to end up doing it for this video. So I wanted to give a more thorough analysis and take on the ban list aside from what I posted earlier. And especially since on Twitter lately, I've been very critical of articles that are talking about TCG ban lists. I thought it would be remiss of me to not come back and, you know, give a more thorough breakdown of what I thought of the ban list. So again, overall, I'm not the biggest fan of this list. Even the changes I thought that were good, I thought they just felt overdue. The best and most well-timed hits, I think, were Chaos War to 0, and Fenrir to 1. Yeah, otherwise, again, even the good hits here were long overdue. So that's how I feel about the ban list. What do you think of it? Definitely do not be afraid to let me know in that comment section below. I would love to hear from you about what you think about the list overall or an individual change here and there. But I think that's going to go ahead and do it for this video. Thanks to everybody who stuck it out and watched all the way to the very end. Let us now move on to the outro. Alright everybody, that's going to do it for this video. Thank you for watching it all the way to the very end. That means a whole lot to me, and it's also a fantastic way to support the channel. And if you're interested in supporting the channel in other ways besides YouTube, there are plenty of ways to do that. If you check out the description below, you'll find a bunch of links down there. One of them goes to my Patreon. You're actually seeing the names of everyone subscribed to the Patreon on the screen right now. So if you're interested in getting your name in the credits here at the end, if you want to see more daily Master Duel content, or if you're interested in one-on-one private coaching sessions, I offer all of that on Patreon. I also stream live on Twitch. Feel free to go ahead and click that link and follow and or subscribe there. I also have the Discord community, if you want to follow that link, where hundreds of duelists have already signed up. Free to join, and you can just come hang out, talk about the game, and chill in general. Final link that's going to be in the description is my Twitter. You can follow that if you want some more notifications of what's happening with the channel. So all in all, thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic day.